Good morning, Central. Happy Mother's Day. Our opener this morning is Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles.
Hey, good morning, Central. Welcome to our virtual service this morning. My name is Michael Ginger. I'm one of the pastors here. I want to be the first to say welcome. We're so glad you decided to join us online this morning. Take a couple moments, leave your name in the comments, say hi, greet each other. It's kind of our way of doing the greeting time. I know the introverts are loving this right now, right? I can say hi. I don't have to see anybody. It's fantastic. So also hit that share button. It's the easiest evangelism you will ever do. And we're hopeful that maybe somebody will interact with this video on your page and might find a home in the same place that you found a home. So take a couple moments, do that. While you're doing that, we have just a couple quick announcements for you. First of all, we want to update you on some of the construction projects that have been happening here. We're making excellent progress on the kids' room. We're pretty much done with all the plumbing work that's been happening. HVAC is moving along, so we'll let things progress a little bit, but we'll give you another field trip or tour in the next couple weeks, so stay tuned for that. We also want to say a big thank you. Earlier this week, we put out a plea to get some help with serving the immigrant community in Galveston. This is a group of folks that have been specifically hit by the COVID-19 pandemic in relation to being able to receive necessary supplies and resources and services. So you have stepped up and delivered food and diapers. You've translated phone calls. It's been amazing. So a big thank you to Nikki Obert and her social action team for leading that. If you're not involved with that and would like to get involved, I'm sure Nikki would be happy to have more volunteers, so reach out to her and she'll get you more information. Our last announcement today is kind of a sad one. Today is Paul Myler, our friendly pastoral intern's last Sunday with us at Central. And Paul has just been an absolute gift to have with us over the last 9 months. He has led Bible studies, he's done project management, he's worked with our unhoused community, he's created our small group curriculum. I mean, just incredible work for a part-time intern who is making less than minimum wage. So we want to bring Paul up just for a second, just to say thank you, Paul. And on behalf of Central, we made this little book for you that's full of photos and letters and well wishes and all kinds of things that we hope you can put in your office at Santa Fe and be a way to remember your time here with us. So This is our gift to you to say thank you for all that you've done.
This is amazing. Wow. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a real pleasure being your intern for these 9 months. I also happen to have a gift for y'all that I'd like to present you with. Surprise, surprise.
Wow.
Yes, so this is a communion paten. I am a woodworker, and so I like to give people things made out of wood, so congratulations. But this is actually a collaboration between me and Beth, so Beth did the resin work. So I hope y'all can use that.
This is beautiful, Paul. So yeah, so Central, when we're finally able to get back together, maybe June, maybe later, we'll be able to take the elements off of this and remember our time with Paul. So Paul, this has been great. I don't think we can handshake,
No,
but we
let's
can
do one of those.
social
There
distance
you go.
elbow bumps. So and you got a sermon to write, right?
Oh yeah, I gotta go do that.
Make sure you do that.
Okay,
So
I'm gonna go do that.
Paul will be back in like 15 minutes or so, hopefully with a sermon for us, his last one. So stick around for that. It's going to be really special. So Central, we start every service off the same way because we think it's really important we get this right. So especially if you're new to our community, hear these words. Whether you are over-churched or under-churched, whether you are a proud evangelical, a recovering evangelical, or not evangelical at all, whether you're used to high church or low church or no church, whether you consider yourself a passionate believer or just a hopeful skeptic, whether you graduated from Penn State or the state Penn, whether you're looking for a community this morning in the midst of social isolation, or you are just worn out by virtual Zoom meetings and Facebook Lives, please know that you're welcome in this place. And just as this God of grace and love and mercy has welcomed us in that same grace, love, and mercy, we think it's important that we take a few moments and welcome each other. So Ezra is about to come up and lead us in our worship today. Again, take a few moments, welcome each other in the comments. We're so glad that you're here with us this morning.
All right, Central, let's worship together this morning. Sin washed away in your blood. Jesus Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.
Thanks, Ezra, for leading us in worship this morning. Central, we didn't forget that today was Mother's Day. You know, Mother's Day is one of those complicated holidays. For many of us, like my family, it's a day where I celebrate a wonderful mom and a wonderful mother-in-law and great, loving, kind relationships. For other families, it's complicated with missing mothers or mothers who wish they were mothers. And so today, we just kind of want to acknowledge that complexity and give space to sit in it. And so it's been tradition around here to offer this Mother's Day prayer. So I'm going to read this. Central, may you hear these words this morning. To those who gave birth this year to their first child, we celebrate with you. To those who lost a child this year, we mourn with you. To those who are in the trenches with little ones every day and wear the badges of food stains, we appreciate you. To those who experience loss through miscarriage, failed adoptions, or running away, we mourn with you. To those who walk the hard path of infertility, fraught with pokes and prods and tears and disappointment, we walk with you. Forgive us when we say foolish things. We don't mean to make this harder than it is. To those who are foster moms, mentor moms, spiritual moms, we need you. To those who have warm and close relationships with their children, we celebrate with you. To those who have had disappointment, heartache, and distance with their children, we sit with you. To those who lost their mothers this year, we grieve with you. To those who experienced abuse at the hands of their own mothers, we acknowledge your experience. To those who lived through driving tests, medical tests, and the overall testing of motherhood, we are better for having you in our midst. To those who have aborted children, we remember them and you on this day. To those who are single and long to be married and mothering their own children, we mourn that life has not turned out the way that you longed for it to be. To those who step parent, we walk with you on these complex paths. To those who envision lavishing love on grandchildren, and yet that dream is not to be, we grieve with you. To those who will have emptier nests this upcoming year, we grieve and rejoice with you. To those who place their children up for adoption, we commend you for your selflessness and remember how you hold that child in your heart. And to those who are pregnant with new life, both expected and unexpected, we anticipate with you. Central, this Mother's Day, we walk with you and we ask God to give you peace. Amen. Friends, this is the time in our service where we talk about offering. Again, it's one of those things we say the same every week. An offering isn't something that can be taken from you. That's called a tax. Instead, an offering is something that has to be given. It has to be offered. So know this morning, you don't have to give to be participating with us online. We believe that God's grace is free. We also recognize that God does some extraordinary things through the ordinary donations that come in through online giving or through the mail slot on Avenue O&a-half during this time of social distancing. And so we ask that if you decide to give this morning, you give generously. We serve the most generous being that's ever existed. And so there's a part of us that's most like God when we're being generous with each other. The easiest way for you to give is through our online app on our website or through the smartphone app. Just click on the Giving tab, and you'll get some prompts there. Mariah and I, my wife, we've just set up recurring payments, so we don't have to think about it week to week. But if you want to do one-time payments, that's fine with us too. However you choose to give this morning, we said just be generous. In just a second, a screen's going to pop up on your screen, and it'll give you more instructions for how to give. Thank you, Central, for your generosity and for making amazing things happen in Galveston.
Good morning, Central. My name is Paul Myler. I am your friendly pastoral intern, but not for much longer. As we said earlier, today is my last Sunday, and I just can't believe it. 9 months has flown by. I can remember the first Sunday that my family and I came to Central, and my kids immediately bought in because there were couches in the sanctuary, and they had never seen that before, and they thought that was amazing. For me personally, I was actually drawn by something else. Even before I came to Central, I was impressed by the slogan that y'all use, this tagline of Grace Wins. I just love that slogan. I think it's such an important idea, and it's such a correct idea. So I want to talk about grace today with y'all. And I'll go ahead and I'll get my Greek lesson out of the way right at the beginning. The Greek word for grace is charis. And can you say it with me? I'll use the Michael line. Can you say it with me? Charis. Charis. Our English word charity comes from this same root word. And charity is something that we're supposed to give unconditionally to each other without any expectation of return. So I think a good definition for grace is unmerited favor. And that unmerited part is so important, especially when we're talking about God's grace. Because we have to remember, we have to continually remind ourselves that God's grace has nothing to do with me and everything to do with God. The idea that God showed me grace even though I did nothing to deserve it, is just mind-blowing to me. And it's a very humbling idea. And it's actually very central to my own spirituality. So the tagline, Grace Wins, really drew me in. And those two simple words, we're saying a lot. We're saying something radical. We're saying that in the end, God's unmerited favor, God's unconditional love is going to win out over sin and death and evil. And that's a bold, big claim, and I love it. And I believe it. But as I started to get to know you, Central, as I started to get my feet on the ground and to look around and see what y'all were doing, what really impressed me the most is that it was more than just a tagline. Beyond the tagline, you were actually doing things. Central, what I love about you is that you actually live out Grace Wins. You act like you believe it. And that shows through in your actions, not just in your words. So when I think about what makes Central central, when I think about your core identity as a community of faith, I think the term grace in action fits. You show God's grace to each other and to this whole island by your actions. I've been thinking a lot about what sociologists call identity markers. An identity marker is something that we use to define ourselves as individuals and as communities. They act as a sort of shorthand. They signal to the rest of the world something about our character and our personality. For example, just to take random examples, if you consider yourself a Texas A&M Aggie, then that means you're all about honor and courage and excellence. But if you are, say, a supporter of the Baylor Bears, I'm not sure what that says about you, really. I'm just kidding, Michael. I'm actually not kidding. And you know what's interesting about Galveston is that you have a very unique identity marker. When I first got here to Central, a lot of people kept asking me, "Are you BOI?" And I had no idea what that meant, so I just said yes. I said, sure, yeah, I'm BOI, which of course is a lie because I was not born on island. But thinking about Central, thinking about what makes this community tick, what it is I love about you guys, is that you're not BOI, you're GIA, you're grace in action. And I've seen countless examples of this. I've seen times when the people of Central personified grace in action. And some are very obvious, some are concrete. They take the form of showers and meals and laundry. They're deliveries of diapers and food to members of the immigrant community. They're collaborations with great organizations like Iconoclast. But there's a lot less obvious examples. There is grace in action in our deeper group meetings, in our midweek Bible studies. I've seen grace in action in simple acts of kindness that occur every day within the unhoused community. I've experienced multiple times when members of that community have shown grace and comfort to me when I needed it. There's a lot of examples I could point to. There's just so many. I could keep listing them, and this sermon would be about 18 hours long. So in the interest of time, I'll lift up just one example. This is a story about Beth. We all know and love Beth. And this story happened pretty early on in my internship here at Central. There was an unhoused young man who used to come around. We'll call him Jay. And Jay was kind of a mess. Jay suffered from a major addiction. And the thing I remember about Jay is that some days he would come in with shoes and some days he wouldn't. And you never knew what kind of footwear he would have. Here's a picture of Jay when he came in one day with a piece of cardboard tied around his foot. And that was his shoe for that day. And the other thing I remember about Jay was that he could be a little difficult. He could actually be a lot difficult. He was by turns angry and needy, surly and cleaning. He was a handful. Jay was what we sometimes called ERG, extra grace required. But I watched as Beth interacted with him. She was so patient and kind. She poured time and energy into Jay. No matter the situation, no matter how slammed we were, she would take time out to care for Jay. And this part is hard to admit, but I distinctly remember thinking to myself, Beth, what are you doing? Why are you wasting so much time with Jay? There were a lot of other people that Beth could have helped, people who probably would have been more appreciative. But I'm ashamed to admit it, but I had made a judgment in my heart about Jay. I had written him off, and I decided that he wasn't worth my time or my energy. But as I continued to watch Beth interact with Jay, it slowly dawned on me that what Beth was doing was a wonderful picture of what grace really looks like, what unmerited favor really is. Beth's actions towards Jay, her outpouring of love and compassion, is what I think about. It's the example I use in my mind when I think about grace in action. And for me, this was almost a little mini conversion event. I felt like the scales had fallen from my eyes. I said, I was blind, but now I see. This was the eureka moment when I finally got it, when I understood what Central was all about. And it is one of the most profound lessons about grace that I have ever learned. It didn't happen in a seminary classroom. I didn't learn it from a book of theology. I didn't learn it from a professor, from a pastor, or even from Michael. It happened when a faithful member of Central was simply going about doing what it is that y'all do. Grace in action. So why did I struggle so much with this? Why is it that I, a Christian my entire life, a seminary student no less, didn't get what grace really looked like? That's a tough question. Part of the answer is I'm a slow learner. But also part of the answer is that true grace is deeply, radically countercultural. If you listen to our society says that only losers and suckers give without thought of return. We're taught at a very early age to look out for ourselves first. And even when we give to charities, even in our philanthropic work, we tend to focus on words like effectiveness and outcomes and performance. The lesson that I learned about grace is that true grace is not concerned with effectiveness, with outcomes, or with performance. And thank God for that. There's something deeply non-intuitive about the kingdom of God. There's something deeply weird about true grace in action. I may be a slow learner, but I'm not the only one. The disciples also struggled with this idea. And Jesus, again and again, would try to teach them, to pound into their head this idea. And here's a great example. Listen to what Jesus says. This is from Luke 6, starting in verse 32. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Boom. I like to imagine that Jesus does a mic drop there, because you really just can't say it any better than that. But man, that is a high bar that Jesus sets for us and sets for all his followers. It's really not easy to buck society, to live so counterculturally. There's tremendous pressure to conform to our culture's expectations. And this has been true since the beginning of Christianity. In the Bible, there are 3 letters attributed to the Apostle Peter. And these are addressed to a group of believers who are feeling just this sort of cultural pressure. Christians in the first century were viewed with suspicion by their neighbors. Christianity was seen as a dangerous cult and a threat to society. Roman society at that time and Roman households followed a very strict hierarchy, with the male head of household at the top, the pater familias, followed by the sons, followed by the wife, followed by the daughters, and the household slaves at the bottom. But Christians said crazy stuff. They said stuff like, there is no longer Greek or Jew. There's no longer slave or free. There's no longer male or female. for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. Yikes. To a good, solid Roman citizen, this sounded weird. It sounded worse than weird. It sounded unpatriotic. It sounded subversive. It sounded perverse. So Peter writes to these Christians to remind them that they are supposed to be a little weird. He says that they should consider themselves resident aliens in this world. And as such, they can expect there to be persecutions and trials. It won't be an easy road if they choose to live counterculturally. But Peter also wants to encourage his fellow Christians and buck up their morale. He wants to rally the troops, if you will. So early on in his first letter, in chapter 1, verse 13, he writes, "Prepare your minds for action. Discipline yourselves. Set all your hopes on the grace that Jesus Christ will bring when he is revealed." I love the imagery of this verse. Prepare your minds for action. Ooh, that sounds so cool. Prepare your minds for action. It reminds me of those movie montages where the heroes are getting ready for the big fight, and they're getting their gear ready, and they're putting on their camouflage paint. Think Rambo tying on his bandana. The literal Greek translation there is gird up your loins. And that's battle language. Guys, I'm going to give you the Texas translation of this verse. What Peter is really trying to say, I think, is something like, saddle up. We've got a job to do. And what is our job as Christians? What action are we preparing for? I think it goes back to what Jesus said. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Show God's grace to each other, to the whole community, to the whole world, even to those that hate us. And why? Because that's what God's people do. And that's the other major thing that Peter wanted to get across to his people in his epistles. He wanted to remind them that they were claimed by God as God's people. Listen to chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you might proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And that's something to remember, Central. That's something to hold on to, especially in difficult times. If I could leave you with just one thought, one thing to hold on to, it would be, once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. And notice that there's something for us to do. Peter tells us, proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you. I would add, not just proclaim, but participate in God's mighty acts of justice, mighty acts of mercy, mighty acts of compassion, mighty acts of grace in action. So guys, again, this is my last official Sunday at Central. You might see me around some during the week, but this is probably the last time you'll see me in worship for a while. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank you for all the grace that you have shown me and my family. You were truly grace in action for me these past 9 months. You've taught me a lot about what God's people should be doing and how God's people can participate in mighty acts of grace. And I'll never forget you. Thank you. I also want to commend you and encourage you during this weird time of the pandemic. Of course, this has been a terrible tragedy, and I would never minimize the suffering this virus has caused. But I do see a silver lining. I see new connections being made. I see new forms of worship happening. I see new communities forming. Everything has been stirred up. And there are all sorts of new opportunities to be grace in action out there. One of the values that I know that you hold dear is creativity. And right now is the perfect time to put that creativity into action. I believe that Central is well equipped, you're well placed, and you're ready to lead that charge. Because whether you know it or not, you've been preparing this. You've been preparing for this. You have prepared your minds for action. Friends, by way of benediction, I decided to rewrite Peter's words to his people. And I wrote them for you. So receive this benediction. Central, saddle up. We've got a job to do. Remember that you are not just BOI, you're GIA, your grace in action. You are God's own people, called to proclaim and participate in God's mighty acts of salvation. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received grace, but now you have received grace. And grace wins. Go and be central this week. God bless you. Amen.